Thank you, Sherry. Welcome everyone to the Real Property Services and FHWA compliance requirements. Thank you for being part of this training. Let me introduce myself. I am Nady Pinuelas. I have 16 years of experience working in right-of-way, and I'm currently working in a temporary position at a headquarters in Sacramento as a local assistant / right-of-way liaison coordinator. I'm co-hosting this training with Eva Marie Figletti, who worked on this PowerPoint presentation. The objective of this presentation is for you to have a comprehensive understanding and clear process of property management. The Division of Local Assistance and Right-of-Way local programs are here to assist you. We are responsible for the oversights of local public agencies for their property management responsibilities. The Division of Local Assistance oversees off-system projects. Right-of-way local programs oversees on-system projects and are the subject matter experts with all right-of-way activities. At the end of this training, you'll be given a survey to complete. Please take the time to complete the survey, as this will only help improve our training to all the local agencies. Eva Marie, please take it away.
Hello, I'm Eva Marie Figletti. I am the Office Chief of Real Property Services for Caltrans in the right-of-way office. I did have the position of the local assistance liaison until my promotion last November. So next on the PowerPoint. So let me give you a history. On May 20th, 2019, a local public agency property management practices review was completed with FHWA, a representative from the Office of Real Property Services, and a representative from the Office of Local Programs. And they went to 5 agencies and they reviewed their files. And within that, they found that Caltrans had 3 compliance issues that they were not meeting. Caltrans guidance was not providing specific direction for conducting oversight for local public agencies in their property management responsibilities, and therefore the CFRs were not being met. The second one was that Caltrans was not providing adequate guidance for local public agencies to manage their properties, which is contrary to the CFRs. And third, Caltrans was not meeting the requirements for providing specific guidance for property management activities as described in the CFRs. And therefore, that started this process of getting us within compliance. Next. So Caltrans came up with 3 recommendations. The first recommendation is that we should update the guidance for the local public agency oversight in the property management manual. The second recommendation was Caltrans to develop a more detailed guidance for local public agencies so that local public agencies could understand their responsibilities as it pertained to property management requirements in the CFRs. And the third was that Caltrans was to develop a policy for performing oversight for local public agency property disposals of excess properties which were used with federal funds. Next.
Okay, I will go ahead and elaborate further in detail regarding the recommendations. Recommendation number 1, which is to develop a new verification process. To assist you with compliance with the CFRs, the Code of Federal Regulations, we have developed a checklist in property management for the local agencies to complete upon purchase of properties needed for construction. On October 15, 2020, the Division of Local Assistance posted Office Bulletin number 20-05 on their blog. On that Office Bulletin, there's a link to the checklist. The checklist, which is Exhibit 13-F, can also be found in the Local Assistance Procedures Manual. We will discuss the checklist further in detail in the upcoming slides. The checklist will be reviewed on a regular schedule intervals by the Caltrans Division of Local Assistance and Caltrans Right-of-Way Local Program. The Division of Local Assistance and Right-of-Way Local Programs will be requesting a sampling of this checklist based on the risk of the projects. It is expected that Division of Local Assistance and Right-of-Way Local Programs keep copies of the checklist in the project file for FHWA to review. Let's move on to the recommendation number 2. Detailed guidance has been drafted. The manual has been revised to better improve guidance. Chapter 11 of the right-of-way manual for property management is a good guidance for the local agencies. The chapter is detailed in landlord-tenant laws, including new statutes. Chapter 13 of the local assistance manual has been updated to clarify the disposal expectation of excess property. Let's move on to recommendation number 3. Policy for performing oversight. In the next 3 slides, we will discuss the new expectation for both the local public agencies, as well as for the Division of Local Assistance and right-of-way local programs. Eva Marie will go over the new expectations.
So there are new expectations for the Division of Local Assistance and the right-of-way local programs. The first expectation is that the E76 that will be completed by local agencies will have an accounting for property management and excess land activities. Further, these 2 divisions will take a sampling, approximately 15%, of the checklist at a regular interval. It will be based on a risk-based approach, which we'll talk about, and it will occur during the acquisition phase, not afterwards. So let's talk about the risk-based approach. So the more properties that are purchased, the greater the risk, and therefore the greater the sampling is going to be required. Further, the higher the value of the purchase is going to be the higher the risk, and a sampling is going to be required. So we will review the project inventories of properties purchased throughout the acquisition phase at a minimum at least quarterly. We will ensure that monies collected are deposited into a Title 23 eligible account, and we will assure that the properties are disposed of within 2 years per Division of Local Assistance policy. Next. So then there are expectations of local agencies. The first expectation is that all properties must be inventoried, and we'll get into that in a couple slides. Each property purchased must have a checklist completed. All properties are properly managed according to the right-of-way property management chapter. All agencies must follow the Caltrans right-of-way property management chapter. And all excess properties must be sold within 2 years after opening roadway to traffic, or within 2 years of submitting a final voucher to FHWA, whichever is earlier. Next. So let's talk about inventories. So the expectation is that everybody inventory their properties, and that is upon purchase of the property. This could be a fully capable computer system that is purchased by the local agency, or it could be as simple as a spreadsheet. It really depends on the agency, the project, and the budget. But the fact of the matter is you have to have some sort of documentation to inventory your properties. The goal is to know all properties have been purchased for the project until construction is complete. There are no federal rules as to what is being tracked. However, just as an example of what the state tracks, we track things such as parcel number, size, address, improvements that are on the property, whether the zoning is commercial, industrial, residential, whether there are property taxes that are owed on that property, if it's rentable, and if there are tenants on the property and the tenant contact information. Obviously, we need to know the rental amount. We need to know the project date and if there's federal funding used on the property. Next.
Okay, I will go ahead and discuss further the checklist. This checklist will serve as an interim exercise to get practice on how to properly manage properties to meet FHWA expectations. The checklist is expected to be phased out as success in real property service oversight is achieved. It also addresses both properties purchased for construction and excess land. It guides on rent, insurance, and inspections. Okay, let's go discuss the property files. Every purchase of fee properties should have a corresponding file. In that file, it is important to keep certain documents such as acquisition documents, recording documents, title report, and diary. Some agencies have a separate property management file, and some agencies have one main file. The main thing is to keep important documents pertinent to that property in that file. Just remember, file documentation ends a construction start date or the end of construction when all excess is sold. It is also important to have diaries as they are vital to explaining to FHWA or overseers why you have done certain actions on a property. Expect for FHWA, Division of Local Assistance, and our right-of-way local programs to request to see your working file on each property. Are there any questions in regards to the property file? If there's no questions, Eva Marie will discuss what happens after the property is purchased.
So after the property is purchased, obviously we want to start a file. And we want to put key information in the data management system where we're inventorying the properties. We also want to inspect the properties, and we'll talk about inspections in a future slides. We also need to make sure that rent of the property, if we accept rent of the property, if it's feasible and appropriate. It needs to be collected at fair market and deposited into a Title 23 account. Property management requires maintaining accounting records for the expenses and receipts related to the use, demolition, removal, and disposal of the acquired property and related improvements. Your records must be maintained for at least 3 years after a property is disposed. Next. So let's talk inspections. So at Caltrans, we inspect our properties at various variables, rates. If a property is vacant, like those small little strips, we inspect those properties once a year. If a property is improved, let's say with a house or a building, and it's occupied, we inspect those properties once a year. If that property is improved with a building and it is vacant, we inspect those properties once a month. Keep in mind that your inspection rates are really dependent upon the neighborhood and what's going on in the neighborhood. So at a minimum, these are the minimum rates. But if you have a property that is at risk of getting lots of garbage on it and becoming a stormwater issue, or there's a lot of homeless and becoming an encampment issue, you want to inspect those properties more frequently. You are able to use the Caltrans inspection forms found in the manual, or you can use your own, whichever is easiest for you. You should be inspecting for maintenance issues. If they're tenants, the property must be decent, safe, and sanitary. You should be inspecting for security issues if there's dumping of debris, break-ins, or trespassing. Diaries should always accompany your inspections to document the actions you have taken before and after the inspection. Always take pictures, by the way. That is your best bet for documentation. If there is dumping, you must clean it up. If there is break-ins, you must secure the building. If there is upkeep, you must fix it so the property is habitable. Next. So renting the property should be performed if construction is sometime out, or if there is inherited tenants on the property and they're staying there until construction. It is up to the agency to decide what's best for the agency on having tenants. At Caltrans, we try to keep tenants in the property as long as possible until such time the property is needed, and then we demolish the properties as soon as possible. So that way they are not attractive nuisances. Follow the Caltrans right-of-way property management chapter regarding inherited tenants, accepting applications, running credit checks, rental agreements, and managing the property during a tenancy. The property management chapter is descriptive of all landlord-tenant laws, so they should help you out.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and discuss the rental agreements. The lease should include the following conditions in order to protect the project or agency's interest in the property. The lease should ensure that the rented property will not be transferred, assigned, or conveyed without approval from the acquiring agency. There should be a provision that allows the lease to be revoked. A provision requiring the tenant to purchase adequate insurance. An example of that will be if a property is a single-family residence with a pool, then insurance will be required. Further detail on what kind of insurance is required can also be found in Chapter 11 of the Right-of-Way Manual. Right-of-Way Exhibit 11EX11, Guideline for Personal Injury, Liability, and Property Damage Insurance. The lease should have a provision allowing for inspections. As Eva Marie mentioned in previous slide, occupied improved properties are to be conducted once a year. In Chapter 11 of the Right-of-Way Manual, there is an Exhibit 11EX 6B, which is a notice of right to inspect. The manual indicates to give reasonable notice in writing. Okay. The lease should also include a provision assuring that the use of the rental property will not interfere with the project's activities. It should also have a provision ensuring that those who are not eligible to receive relocation benefits at the initiation of negotiation would not gain eligibility to receive relocation benefits when they are required to move from the rental property. An example of that will be an inherent tenant who receives relocation benefits. An inherent tenant will receive relocation benefits versus all others who came in after the acquisition would not be eligible for relocation benefits. Please note, all revenues must be applied to Title 23 eligible activities, and if property is purchased with federal funds, rent must be a fair market rent unless the local public agency believes there's a public interest. In this circumstance, a public interest finding, which is a PIF, is requested by the local public agency through Caltrans to obtain FHWA approval. The three factors for a PIF are social, economic, or environmental purposes. An example will be the use of a property for short-term lease until construction for low-income housing. Any questions in regards to the rental agreement? There's no questions. I will move on to the next slide. Let's go on with disposal of excess. As a local agency, you are required to manage the property until it is incorporated into the construction project or disposed of. Per Caltrans policy, you have 2 years after opening the roadway to traffic or within 2 years after submitting the final voucher to FHWA to dispose excess properties. The local agencies are to follow certain portions of the Caltrans Excess Land Chapter 16 pertaining to appraisals, review, and disposal processes. Caltrans Form RW 16-5, purchase and sales agreement for public sales, can be used and updated by the local agencies. Properties must be sold at fair market value, and funds are to be deposited into a Title 23 transportation project account. Exceptions for fair market value must be approved by FHWA through the public interest finding for social, economic, and environmental purposes. Another example will be excess sold to a local agency for community park development. Please be aware the PIF is not guaranteed. Any questions in regards to disposing excess? Okay, there's no more questions. Eva Marie will go over what to keep in mind.
So, in closing, to keep in mind, all properties must be managed from purchase to construction or until they're disposed of. Always inventory your properties. Use a checklist to submit and submit them to the Division of Local Assistance or right-of-way local programs when asked. Sell your properties within 2 years after opening the roadway to traffic or within 2 years after submittal for final voucher to FHWA, whichever is earlier. And we understand that that is a difficult task sometimes. Expect that FHWA, Division of Local Assistance, and right-of-way local programs to ask to see how you are managing your properties. And the last slide is information, links to various manuals that have been updated to reflect this information. You can look at our local assistance chapter for our local programs chapter, our right-of-way local programs chapter, our right-of-way property management chapter, or you can email Nettie or myself at rightofway@dot.ca.gov, and we can answer questions that you have at that time.